manufacturing is being challenged. I don't think it's a question of, the product was an issue without question, but the marketing was a big part of it. I think General Motors was just resting on its laurels and assuming that everybody would continue to buy it. I want to introduce everybody who is just tuning in. I sound like a radio show. To Dr. Chuck Goodis. Dr. Chuck Goodis, on at least 2 occasions, the Edge Endo being the second, has revolutionized endodontics in the context of minimally invasive instruments, in the context of being able to garner instruments in one place, as we've just discussed, and we'll come back up. But in talking to Chuck just now, and like talking to Mike Picos, which is interesting, they both come from Greek backgrounds. And in Chuck's case, it was from Detroit, Michigan. And I used to go to Windsor to lecture a lot, and used to go across the bridge and go to Greektown and and plates. So it was fantastic, right?
Anytime you could have flaming cheese, that was always. We only went out to eat. When I would ask my dad about going out to eat, we only went to Greektown. It's like, why would you go out to eat? You know, can we get McDonald's? No, we only went out to eat and got Greek food. That was the only food we ever got.
Are there decent Greek restaurants where you live? You're in Silver Spring.
Right now I'm in Winter Springs, or Winter Park.
Winter Park.
Winter Park, which is just outside of Orlando. And I would say I'm so used to how Greek cooking is done in Detroit. I find in New York, I like it. In Chicago, I would say it's solid. But Detroit Greek food is my favorite. And anywhere else around the country, I find the Greek cooking, it's a little different. I think it might be also my relatives are from the Peloponnesus Peninsula, which is more mountainous and inland, and a lot of Greeks from Detroit came from that region, and I'm just used to more of that cuisine. Whereas you go to other areas, you'll get more of the around the islands, which there's so many beautiful Greek islands. So I'm used to more of I'll say a meat and potato type Greek cuisine, more of a Texas. Yeah, if there was a Texas in Greece, that's where my relatives are from.
They don't be wearing riding cows or riding horses, right?
When you go to Peloponnesus and you see they still herd the different livestock down the road, and when you're driving down the road, it is truly right out of Godfather 2 when he goes back, and people are just, they're carrying rifles just because they're going to hunt. You know, if they see a rabbit or so it's great to go into the villages of Greece. I know most people are going to go, you're going to go to the islands if you go to Greece, right? Because it's like when you go to Hawaii, most people go to Maui. But if you ever, my family's from the Olympia area, and it's just very, I enjoy that area. And I think that's one thing that attracted me to New Mexico and why I opened my practice there, was because the mountains in Albuquerque are very, very similar, in Santa Fe, very similar to Greece. I realize you're dealing with more of a high desert climate as opposed to a Mediterranean climate, but it reminded me a lot of that. And I know people from California might say their mountains are more like Greece or Italy. That's okay, but I have a certain cuisine I like, and it seems like Detroit, I enjoy their cuisine a little more. It's like, as you know, Northern Italy, Southern Italy cuisine, Tuscany cuisine, it's different. But as much Greek food as you can eat is what you should do.
I love it. Do you still have family there, or are they have all emigrated?
In the Olympia area, most of the people, most of my relatives now, just like in a large, whether it's Italy or China, they seem to spend the weekday in the city in Athens, and then they'll go back to the villages on the weekends or on longer summer breaks. And my relatives, they still, I'm not going to say olive plantations. It's I come from much humbler. I come from peasant roots. but
hey.
you know, they have maybe a few hundred olive trees down the in different valleys, and they'll pick them. And it really cold weather, like I'm pretty sure it's around October. It's tough work. So yes, still have relatives there. Unfortunately, since my dad passed a few years ago, we don't talk nearly as much.
Right.
And as we all know, as our parents move on, it's always tough on all of us.
For sure.
And even now with this, my mom, she lives just about a mile away. She lives in an assisted living, like a little cottage, but
right.
I can't visit her. I usually go there every morning. So now every morning I just go there and wave from 100 yards. I think my Greek background is very important, as we discussed. We were talking about why it's important to remain humble.
Yeah, it was interesting. As I said, most people would look at you as an inventor, an endodontist. You've changed so much of the endodontic world. But what was interesting, as I say, in terms of, I spoke to Mike Picos, who's literally, if not the top tier, he is certainly in it. And he's Greek, and he came from a little town in Ohio called Campbellville, I think it was. And while we were talking, there was a word, and for the life of me, I don't remember what it was, but it dealt with humility, it dealt with community service, it dealt with family. It was sort of like a catch-all phrase for what the ethos of being Greek meant as you were growing up. So you've got this entire family who are working for Ford. They understand manufacturing, right? They know what assembly lines are like, right?
Yes. My dad made sure he understood who Ford Motor was paying for the food on the table. He was.
You got it. What was your relationship like with your dad? Is that how you got? I mean, you're a manufacturer. You understand.
Yes.
You're a mechanical engineer.
He was an electrical engineer, and I would say very, very big Greek personality, very warm person that loved to talk to everyone and loved to communicate with the family. Was he I like to say a strong Greek male? Oh yeah, he was. He made sure he made sure you knew how he felt on issues.
Right.
There was never any doubt the humility and the care he had for family, without a doubt. That you knew. Sometimes you wish it could be a little quieter, but Greeks tend to be a little bit on the loud side sometimes. So he always worked as an electrical engineer for Ford. He worked in the manufacturing plants to keep the how you keep the plants going and the best way to instead of designing automobiles, it was more how you keep the factories going the best. And then my older brother, he works with the design team for the F-150, and he's very, very proud of that. And my other two brothers have worked for Fords for years, and so we the automobile industry, its direction is always as Alfred Sloan once said, if GM gets a cold, the rest of the country gets the flu. So I always you think, like, if you grew up in LA, you probably think things from a Hollywood standpoint. When you grow up in New York, you think of things probably from a stock market standpoint. Now that I'm down in Orlando, I'm thinking of things from a Mickey Mouse standpoint, like Mickey Mouse will soon open. And I think that will, once as you've probably heard, NASCAR is thinking about starting up again, even though they'll have no fans. Mickey Mouse will probably open up in the next 4 to 8 weeks. I think once we're switching gears a little bit, but I think that's going to help dentistry a great deal, is that people are going to feel more comfortable going back to the dentist. Although I do like to joke, until people get a couple of haircuts in and go to the manicurist.
Yeah, right.
Once they do that, then they're going to start feeling more and more comfortable about going back to the dentist. But while I see that there's going to be certain change, I think it's just part of our genetic makeup. We're social people. We need to be around people. We survived as a species, not because we're the strongest, not because we're the fastest, but because we got together and formed civilization. So I think when I hear people talk about things are going to change forever, I think that's how all people think when an event happens. But if you look, 5 months ago, we were living a certain close way, and I think in another year we'll be living very similarly. If I would say the only change that will happen is what you usually see in Asia, that I think out of courtesy, if you think you're feeling sick, or if you feel your immune system may be down, you'll probably wear gloves and masks more. Whereas people never did that in the US. So I think that's going to change a little bit. I always viewed it as a courtesy in Asia, that they were being polite. And I could see that happening in the US. But I do see things getting back to normal. I've been pleased, over these last 4 weeks, Edge is moving in a positive direction. And even the numbers I've been hearing, I think as an endodontic company, we are faring much better than the other endodontic companies. And we've been very fortunate because great people at Edge, great endodontists and dentists that support Edge. So I've been very, very fortunate that people have brought Edge into their practices and see its value. So I've been very fortunate with that.
You were talking before, you mentioned Alfred Sloan, obviously Henry Ford II. Ford was an interesting company, and again, pertains to your manufacturing background. Ford was one of the only companies that never went into the Batman style back ends of cars, right? They didn't have airfoils in those days, but they had bat wings, right? Chevys and this, that, and that. And Ford actually, the intermittent wiper, that was that movie, and Ford also had Ford had the Ford Fairlane in the early 50s, I think. Had the what Mercedes has, the folding hood that
I just know the Ford Fairlane used to be what we would the Goodis family would be rocking in the
Ford
late
Fairlane.
60s, early 70s. We were a very cool family with the Ford Fairlane.
That was the black, white, and pinkish look in those days.
Yeah, I think we had a pinkish one. I think my dad could get it for a good price.
I'm sure. But you raised an interesting point. At one time, American automotive manufacturers got arrogant, right? They assumed, even when the Japanese started bringing stuff in, the quality wasn't so great. America just figured, hey, we're cool. We're never going to have to change. We're always going to dominate the market. Their marketing sucked. It got crazy and horrible. Even their logo designs and the cars got,
it did. It got bad.
Crazy. But so you made an interesting point. Your perception on, given your work ethic, your perception also was the work ethic is important, but if people don't know about the product and get kind of go, wow, that's really cool. That brings them to the website, brings them to the promotional material. And you were saying you're Mike Killian is the guy that you work with. That's his PR team, his advertising team. But you're highly instrumental in this. Obviously, you have a certain you have a vision. Maybe you think, aside from thinking outside the box, a lot of people see things sort of off to the side, a kilter. It was interesting. You were saying that. I was saying, can we center you? You said, no, you like to be off at the side.
I would like to be a little more over here.
Go ahead. No worries. Anywhere you want to go. But that's a reflection on how you function, right? You don't see what's in front of you. You see what's going on peripherally. So that peripheral vision has made a huge difference in why Edge has been successful. I mean, I look at the ads. They're never the same. The colors change. The text, the fonts change. For people that aren't into that, okay, like whatever. But if you look at ads in Vogue, you look at anything that's in a lifestyle magazine, you guys are doing that. So you're reflecting lifestyle as an end of garments, right? You're selling product.
It is. When you bring that up, I love to look. One of the first magazines in advertising I would look at is I like to call them board shops. Skateboard, surfboard, snowboard. They're very, very edgy and anti-institutional.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one thing I saw in dentistry was that the very conservative advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thought if you were going to try to make a difference, you need to think more like a board shop, more like an outlier of the norm. So because the other large companies are all going to show things in a particular way. Like if you look at drug companies right now, it's the same ad every single.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy family holding or they couldn't hold their grandchild, now they can hold their grandchild. Exactly. And it's the same ad over and over and over. And I go, I don't even know what the drug is anymore. And I thought dental ads were very much the same. So I wanted to look at it from a very, what we like to call edgy standpoint. And some people are not familiar with it, and some people are very attracted to it. But I always view you have to get people off the fence in your advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Too many people will say, yeah, I like it, it's nice. And you have to get them off the fence. So the advertising is for you to make a decision. You have to make a choice. I'm trying to challenge the person looking at it to accept or reject what I'm saying. And I think it's very important instead of just, and then put it down. So I think that sort of advertising when you're in a crowded field is important.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my viewpoint. You are going to get some people who will call and say, I saw your ad with a guy with his head in the toilet and I'm offended and I'm never going to buy your product again. Usually they don't say again. Usually they say, I won't buy your product in the future.
Okay.
Meaning they'll never start. Well, I always view it, they weren't going to buy my product anyways because they're part of the established norm. And they're gonna stay with what they're buying. And again, there's nothing wrong with loyalty. I would like Edge customers to be loyal. If someone says they're always going to be a Dentsply customer, they're always going to be a Kerr customer, that's okay. It's just what I'm trying to do in my advertising is saying, hey, non-Edge buyer, I really want you to look at our product right now. I think we're offering a great product at a really great price. And almost get them to, in a way, certain emotionally challenge them to try it. And it's been successful. I really view that Edge now being the second, we sell the second most files in the US. And I view in the very, very near future, we'll sell hopefully the most. And why I would like that to happen is because I think it gives a very fair price to the dentist and the endodontist. If you were to say, Chuck, what's your goal? My goal would be that Edge is successful because it helps make endodontists and dentists successful, because that's part of that heritage you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I think of community and humility, things work out. So I think we've got a really great product. And, as I was mentioning before, I think with the automobile industry, GM in the 80s had nearly 60% of the market share. And then came, I think, the mistake that a lot of large corporations have is the accountants and the attorneys start running the companies. The designers and the marketers stopped running GM in the 80s. And I think that was the big downfall of GM. And it was I would say, a pivotal moment for me that I said, if I'm in my practice as an endodontist and as in Edge, is that I don't want accountants and attorneys running the company, which I see from other dental companies.
Right.
I think the designers and the advertisers should run it, and you use the accountants and the attorneys, for good advice. That's what they should be. And I would say, I think that's some of the mistakes that are, in my opinion, that's some mistakes that are going on in some of the other dental companies. Is you have amazing giants in the field, like Ben Johnson and Cliff Ruddle and Steve Buchanan and John West. And these are people that should be designing instruments and leading the charge. And then you should have great advertising. And as you know, you have Dr. Castellucci, which is amazing, and Dr. Gambarini, who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years, and his research on file design has just almost exploded my brain the way he's thinking. So I think if we could get endodontic companies starting to think about having the designers, actual endodontists, and as we all know, there's a lot of great young endodontists with better ideas than I'll ever have. That we need to have involved. But I do think, I think if Edge keeps to that, I think we can continue to have success. So that's what my plan is that if we can have Edge focus on do what's right for the dental community, stay humble, and try to design great instruments, and have some fun with our advertising. We actually haven't done anyone with their head in the toilet, but we are going to now. I guarantee.
That sounds like a good idea. So you had a mentor. You had a really important mentor. You had John McSpadden.
Yes. Yes. First of all, I would say, which I'm going to bring up John, is that as far as mentors, like all of us, I would say the first person I ever heard speak, I was in high school, and my uncle, George Goodis, who's an endodontist. So I would say that's my number one mentor, is Dr. George Goodis. But I remember he said, you need to come to the Detroit District Dental Society, and you need to come to this meeting. You need to hear Frank Wine. And I was blown away by Frank. And then a year later, I heard Dr. Herb Schilder, and I was just when you can balance Dr. Wine and Dr. Schilder, this is my viewpoint. I know some people are in separate camps, and I'm more, if you can blend Dr. Schilder and Dr. Wine, I think you get a great viewpoint on instrumentation, how to even design instruments, everything from when Frank would talk about how you should file one side of the instrument down so it wouldn't have ridges. And then when you're listening to Dr. Schilder, again, this is before dental school, so I probably didn't pick much up. But when you're just listening to this conical shape or form that he's talking about as a kid, I was just, I think, blown away that people were thinking this way. And then my other mentors would be Dr. Langland, who was at University of Connecticut. He had just retired, but another giant in the field. Dr. Lars Spomberg, who's just so well respected and an amazing researcher, and then Dr. Cameron Safavi, who was still at the University of Connecticut, where I did my endo residency. So I would say these are all great mentors. And then I was fortunate to meet John McSpadden when I was in my endo residency. This is in '94, and I remember Dr. Spomberg, he laid out a bunch of nickel titanium rotary instruments, and he sort of joked, but serious, said, "Chuck, this is future endodontics. Go figure it out." And and he has an interesting sense of humor. But anyways, I said, okay. He said, you should go visit these guys for your research project. So I went and talked to Derek Keith, who started Quality Dental, and then he formed with Ben Johnson, Tulsa Dental, and then of course that eventually got bought by Dentsply. So I was able to spend an afternoon with Derek, and then the following morning I visited with John McSpadden. And I remember he had a couple of visitors, I can't remember who they were, but just between root canals, he would sit and talk, and he was just talking endo and file design. And I probably ended up spending the whole day there. And he said, Chuck, why don't you come join my practice on weekends? So I took the Southern boards and was able to get a Tennessee license, and I would fly down on weekends to John's practice. And then a lot of times he was holding lectures. That's the first time I ever met Howard Farron from Dental Town. And we all know Howard's very engaging, and and he was engaging as a young man, and he's engaging as still a young man.
Yeah.
But this is when John was first developing the K3 instrument, and I found it very fascinating listening to his logic on why he was doing things. So when you start piecing things together, a lecture from Herb Schilder when I was in high school, another lecture from Frank Wine when I was in high school, and then I start studying what they would talk about in books, and then listening to my uncle, being an assistant for my uncle, and then listening to John. It was very, very fascinating. So just these different viewpoints and techniques, I think really helped me think about, hey, maybe I can do this. And then, I would then I opened my practice in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I remember thinking, these are good instruments, but I really think I could design them a little better and a lot less expensive. And it was more from that standpoint. And then I saw some of the real constraints we were having with instruments. I was a big fan of Erica Branson, talks a lot about anatomy.
Mhm.
And I remember listening to Eric one time at AAE. Again, this is all 20, 25 years ago, before Eric knew who I was.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the dental triangle. And it really got me to think how we're wiping away a lot of tooth structure in the coronal third just so we can get our, I just thought to myself, our fat instruments down there.
Mhm.
And that's when I started to think, why don't we start varying the tapers? Now, of course, this is something that Steve, Dr. Buchanan, was thinking too, that keep things at about, with the GT system, 1 millimeter maximum flute diameter. I just thought if you varied the taper and continued the flutes up to 15 millimeters, I think it could be a little more successful. So that's where the V-taper came from. And
Okay.
that's where I started to really think about minimally invasive endodontics. And I think it was really Eric Herbranson and I that came up with this term, unless someone can, but we were sitting there drinking Pete's coffee at his house. And I was talking about how we're too invasive. This is back in 2000. And I said, we need to become up, non-invasive. We need to have this non-invasive, minimally non-invasive. And I remember Eric said, Chuck, it's minimally invasive. Why can't you figure it out? because Eric's a very straight shooter. He has a vision of clarity that I don't always have. And I would definitely view Eric as one of my mentors too. And a great friend. And that's where I decided altering the tapers, keeping things at 1 millimeter, and was the start of the V taper. And now we're going to be launching, what we were supposed to launch at AAE was our MIS system, minimally invasive system, which we were going to offer 3 systems with a maximum flute diameter, or the wire was going to be 0.8 millimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually something that came from a lecture with, my uncle would hold a conference up in Mackinac Island. And I remember John Cotomy was speaking, and then I spoke after him. And we know John shows those incredible preps that I could only do in my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying 4 years ago, we need to start coming out with 0.8 millimeter diameter wire, because if John keeps shrinking these preps down anymore, we're going to need to. So we've been working on a 0.8 millimeter diameter wire, and I think that'll be even more minimally invasive. I think with bioceramics, it's as being what I would consider a main filling material. And then the gutta percha, I love the way Eric would talk about this hydraulic effect with the gutta percha. And then you do your down pack. I know you're not able to quite get the down pack we would all, the Herb Schilder down pack.
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty difficult if your orifice, your coronal orifice is only 0.8 millimeter to get the Herb Schilder down pack. But I think with bioceramics, and if we could at least melt the gutta percha down halfway, and do some nice packing, I think it's a nice technique. Mm-hmm. So this is where I'm talking about blending what Dr. Schilder and Dr. Wine were talking about. I don't think they're binary. I don't think a Schilder endodontist and a Wine endodontist, I don't think we need to be binary anymore. I think we can yin yang the two together. And I think that's my focus, is how to you yin yang Herb and Frank. even though I never personally got to have a conversation with Dr. Schilder. I'm going to call him Herb because I read enough of his. And when you get brought up in a Disney movie, I can call him Herb. And Frank, I have had a few conversations with, and as we all know, his contribution to dentistry, just amazing. So that's where, if the way I see endodontics going is blending these two giants, being minimally invasive, but still have, let's say, an 8 taper at the apex. I think we can have an 8 taper at the an 08 taper apex for the first 4 millimeters and still have a 0.8 millimeter diameter orifice. And now with the new irrigation techniques, I think this is more possible. I think what San Endo has done has helped dentistry a great deal in endodontics. I remember Gary Carr, another giant in the field, discussing how is instrumentation all that important because we need to work on irrigation. And I think San Endo opened the door. I think I like the mechanics behind it. I think the fluid dynamics theory that they're using is very solid. I just think there's a way to do it in simpler terms that accomplishes the exact same effect and at a 1/10 of the cost and at a 1/10 per case. But that's just my opinion. Again, I'm always looking for it. How can we get great irrigation and great irrigation devices at a cost that people can afford? And, you know, I know Steve, Dr. Buchanan, I know I've heard he's launching something, an irrigation device. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure it'll be great because Steve is solid. And I love going to lunch or dinner with Steve. His mind thinks all the time. So I enjoy talking to him a great deal. So that kind of leads to where Edge is moving towards even more minimally invasive. I think it was, I'm going to say started with the V-taper, but I'm okay if Steve goes, Chuck, you're delusional. It was really started with the GT, and that would be fair. But we're with our newer systems going down to 0.8 millimeter in diameter, the minimally invasive system, we're going to offer 3 systems that way. And by using bioceramics, by using, I think, more of a modified Schilder down pack, and with irrigation, like you said earlier, John has been developing an irrigation, John McSpadden, you know, hopefully that will come out. And with whether it's San Endo's irrigation, whether it's Edge Endo's irrigation devices, whether it's Steve's new irrigation devices, I think there's going to be only great things for the horizon for endo. I think we get it. If there's one thing, I know there were great practitioners trained in the 70s and the 80s, but I would say, I think when we're combining these giants, I think we really get it. And the future for endo is a new golden era. Sometimes they talk about golden eras a few years ago. I see the golden era coming up. So I'm very, very encouraged.
Interesting. I know that when I spoke to John Ferrone, they were pretty close to getting John's product out. Now, he's had that around for a while.
Yeah, McSpadden.
Sorry, McSpadden, right.
We all love John Ferrone.
Well, you know. Yeah, John McSpadden has been working on this. The last time I visited him down in Tennessee, he had these things all ready to go, and he says, "Have a drink, Ken. Drink this." Wait, it's an irritant, right? So he said, I'm not doing it. Like, it's crazy. He said, no, drink it. Nothing. It's like drinking water, right? So he apparently developed it at Oak Ridges with a partner of his at the Oak Ridges Laboratories.
Yeah.
And so, he's been talking about it for a while, but what he then began to show you what he could do with strips and the effect it would have and everything else. So is this going to be something that will be incorporated into the devices that Edge is coming up with that we can't talk about?
If John, I haven't talked with him on that, but I like to call it a cocktail because it's been called a cocktail by other people. Do I see it as part of our cocktail? I wouldn't be surprised.
Nice.
Right now, I think we all agree 17% EDTA and as high a strength as you reasonably feel comfortable with sodium hypochlorite.
Right.
And a 2% chlorhexidine. I think they're really, really helping us a lot. And with John's ingenuity and new things that he's coming out with, I know it'll help Endo because he's helped Endo so much in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah. So I have one question. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. You came up with V-taper. You became a force to be reckoned with in endodontics, and then you hit a wall. Okay. Some people weren't happy with it. I don't want to mention any names because I don't want knocks on the door. But you got hit with an 800-pound gorilla, and they didn't like what you were doing. They came after you, which, this is sort of the myth, the endodontic myths through history. I obviously you don't want to talk about it directly, but what was it like to get confronted like that and really have to fight for your future?
Well, I like to say, we'll go back to the advantage of being in a Greek family with 3 older Greek brothers. Mm-hmm. There's no 800-pound gorilla stronger than 3 older Greek brothers.
Sure.
So I would say my brothers trained me for it. At times it's interesting, but I was very fortunate to have a practice that could help out. Mm-hmm. Because fees can get expensive, and this is where anytime you get into a field, there's chances that people can decide one way or another to use. I guess we'll just say that's what I said. They bring the attorneys out. And you just have to say, I'm not going away. You're just not gonna go away. And we've all done this. Did I have to mortgage the house, mortgage the practice? Oh yeah, I went all in. And it's where you go, it's time to put all your chips on the table. So these are things that I know it sounds a little bit like I'm sounding like an 18-year-old singer who's going to Hollywood or going to LA. You have to decide that this is what you believe in and this is what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And plus I knew worst case that would happen, I could always do pretty good root canals. So yeah. I had a future. Yeah. So when you get into a field like let's say any technology field, you have to know there's going to be other companies that whether it's Samsung or Apple, Microsoft, they just bam, 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 bam. This is what they like to hit you with is legal things, and you just have to be prepared for it. And just know that I always confidently know in my heart that I've looked at the landscape and I know that I'm not stepping on anyone's toes from a legal matter. But if someone feels otherwise, you just have to show it. And right. I've been very fortunate in the past, and hopefully in the future, things will show that I've done my research, and I feel very, very confident that Edge is doing the right things the right way. But yeah, it is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But my brothers helped prepare me for it.
Good. So what did they come after you for? Like, they have to have a valid argument. They had to come after you for something specific.
There's it can be on patents of manufacturing, or it could be on patents of design. And these are just things that it's important to study and make sure you understand. It's good to understand patents before you go into a field.
So that was the challenge accurate? Like, I mean, you obviously have to fight for a long time, but was there really veracity to the challenge, or was this simply trying to,
now this is my opinion. This is purely my opinion. I believe that some companies are bringing up lawsuits and finding patents and trying to extend what the true meaning of their patent is to try to say, hey, nobody can be in our space.
right?
And I just don't think that's right. I think that's just legally trying to monopolize a situation. This is my humble opinion. I'm not, it's what I believe. And this is what you're going to find is some companies, as I said, they try to have the attorneys and the accountants run it instead of designers and advertisers. Yeah. If I was in their place, I probably would have used the great endodontists that I mentioned earlier, just to keep designing great products and come up with great advertising. But so I do not believe there was validity to it.
It's interesting what you're talking about. I was just sort of mulling over your background. Ford had everything under the sun. The only thing they still have is Mustang and the F-150, which your brother used to work on.
Yes.
GM, Buick's gone, Oldsmobile's gone, Pontiac's gone, Chevy's still around, but so. They came up with an electric car they didn't know how to market.
No, it was horrible.
Yeah.
The Volt and the Bolt. I don't know if you've been in them. I like the vehicles. They're really nice vehicles, but they did not know how to market them at all.
No. Same thing.
They know how to market Escalades, though.
Exactly. So they got their high profit cars. My daughter has a Suburban, for example, which is like
love Suburban.
And the Escalade is like, you can't go to a red carpet event anywhere in the world and not see this crew of Escalade showing up.
Yes.
And so they kind of lucked out. Their market share is they still have product in Europe, and they're sort of global network. They're still Vauxhall, I guess, or whoever that's theirs. But all corporations seem to go the same way. They don't pay attention to design, marketing, customer wants and needs. They just worry about bottom lines. And that is the death knell for a corporation, because ultimately it dilutes its value. So there is a question I do want to ask, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're going to be continuing to manufacture. You're going to try very hard to bring new innovative products in based upon your background as an endodontist, and obviously the nucleus of friends that you have. But post-COVID dentistry is about to hit in a big way.
Yes.
The number of patients you can see, whether you simply have to dedicate time slots that don't allow overlap for recare or emergencies or whatever, simply because it's impossible. The amount of time that will have to be devoted to cleaning an operatory, the recognition that anything in dentistry produces aerosol. Granted, rubber dam will make a difference, but maybe they have to put scrubbers in every operatory. It's possible.
It is possible. It's going to take time, as we all know. If they said tomorrow you have to have all this, it would take 5 years for 100. When you think about Canada and the US, there's got to be 100,000 dental offices. You can't just turn this around.
No. No, you don't have the manufacturing capacity to even produce what you need. They have to ramp up like crazy. So you're a young dentist graduating today, like you were at one time. You're faced with student loan debt. You're faced with the fact that DSOs are all over you because they have to keep their production up. You're faced with the fact that a lot of older practices are not worth purchasing. You're faced with the fact that the practices that are worth getting into are large groups, which means you're low man on the totem pole right out of the blocks. What would you tell that person, given your history and your background?
It's definitely going to depend your personality. With me, I knew for myself, joining a large practice probably wasn't going to work, where I was going to be the low person on the totem pole.
Right.
So I knew I wanted to open my own practice. So I looked at Albuquerque, New Mexico, and realized there was a need for endodontists. Now, if your greater need is you want to hang up your own shingle, there's a lot of places you can do that still. Is it Manhattan? No. Is it LA? No. Is it South Beach? No. Is it Dallas? No. Denver? No. Pueblo, Colorado? Maybe. Casper, Wyoming? Maybe. Albuquerque? Maybe. Santa Fe? No. Gallup, New Mexico? Yes. So if you want to open up your own place, you're going to have to see what's more important, because if you want to live in San Francisco, I'm thinking of Stephen Cohen. I think he's in Union Square.
Yeah, Union Square.
Another great endodontist, great mentor also. I think Steve would say, good luck.
Yeah.
But do I think there's still areas in the Bay Area that you could? I think there are. It's just you have to go. I've had some great Chinese food in Hayward. Maybe Hayward's perfect.
Right.
So I would say, if you want to open up your own practice, you're probably going to have to go to areas that are less traveled.
Right.
You're going to have to go to the road less traveled. If that's not your person, if it's like, no, my spouse and I really want to be in San Francisco, that's okay. I think I'd probably call up Steve Cohen. He'd probably talk to you. He'd be happy to talk and go, okay, this is what it's going to have to take to do it. And you'd have to modify your office size. I can't remember who. They were at AAE a few years ago, an endodontist, and he was showing his office size was 500 square feet, something insane. But he was able, from what I remember, he saw four patients. He was able to do four root canals a day, 3 root canals a day. His rent was reasonable. And he was able to earn that sort of income, and him and his family could live there. So I go, okay, you can do that. Or, yeah, if you said, I don't want to do that, then you're going to have to join a big practice. You're going to have to be a low person on the totem pole. And the person that bought my practice in Albuquerque, he was offered a position at a very lucrative practice in Phoenix. But they said the buy-in is going to be $800,000, and he decided. Chuck was selling his practice with the building and the chairs and everything for a lot less than that. So I would say, if you're an endodontist coming out of school, I think, one, you do need to know how to do implants. I would say you need to know how to do implants.
Right.
I probably saw 2 cracked teeth a day that needed implants. And the general dentist would have loved for me to do the implants.
Right.
They would have loved for me to do the implants. So I would say, if you want to be a successful endodontist, one, figure out who you are, meaning, do you have to open up your own practice? Okay, then you're gonna have to open in a small area. It's just how it is. Or if you want to be in a big area and have your own practice, you're gonna have a very humble type practice. But you can still be successful. But you're not gonna be able to have a plastic surgeon's office in San Francisco or South Beach, open it on your own, or Manhattan. That's not going to happen. But you can have a nice practice, or you say, I have to be in Manhattan. You join a practice. You might have to pay $800 million. I don't know the number. Buy in. You're working hard for 10 years, and then you're a full partner. So I would say, if one of my children wanted to go into endo, I would say, I think it's great. But what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And you have to know how to do implants. You have to. You have to. I get there's going to be, if you were to say, Chuck, the ridge is almost gone on number 9, and they want to be a model. Okay. I get you don't want to do that. You know, they're going on America's Most Talented, but they got to fix number 9 with an implant. But I think an endodontist could probably do 70%. You tell me, because you do implants. I don't think
it's an issue. I don't think there's a lot of pushback. You know, people go, I'm an endodontist, that's my area. Well, if you do microsurgery, you can do implants. It's just that simple. You understand soft tissue management. You understand bone like osseous management. You know, preservation of bone. Even endodontists right now are currently doing PRF. Okay. So, I mean, if you're doing all that, that's what implantologists do, right?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about curry plate bone with screws and this, that, and the other, but you can put bone tacks in, hold a membrane in. You know, you're not doing quadrants, you're doing individual teeth kind of thing. I don't see it being a problem. All of which leads us to the next question, which probably, I don't even know if you can answer it. I don't know if it's Edge, the new silent. Hey, all right, didn't come from me.
Edge is going to be launching implants over the next 12 months. We're going to, the top, they'll be very similar to the top 6 implant brands, and I think you'll find them at a very, very, very competitive price. I think I would like to do, I think you know where I'm going, but I'm going to say this lightly. Ideally, I'd like to do for implants what we were able to do with endo, but I think that's a pretty bold statement. But I would like to offer people an option to not have to change their technique,
right?
But to not have to pay $250 an implant, $350. it just doesn't seem right. So the future for Edge is to get into implants. It's also to get into PPE. I would say, if there's one thing that I'm kicking myself in the head in, is we were supposed to be fully vested into PPE 6 months ago. And it just, for a number of reasons, sometimes you just kick the can down the road. And I wish I would have, because it was in my court.
Yeah,
I could have pulled the trigger 6 months ago. Now, fortunately, we are going to be getting masks and gloves, I expect, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, because we need to be able to offer masks and gloves to our clinicians. Right. And I think you'll find our mask and gloves prices are very, very good and kind to you. So the future for Edge is selling a high quality implant that you won't have to change your technique, PPE, and that's the direction we're going. Obviously, we're looking on instrumentation. We're looking whether we've been exploring whether it's electric discharge, laser, water jet, forming the instrument. I still think the heat treatment process that Edge is doing is, I feel it's superior to anyone's out there. And I think it produces an amazing instrument that I think it's tough for another company to compete with. I think it's kind of tough. I think when you look at our price and our instrument, I think it's really, really good. I'm also looking at, this has been, even when the first SAF file came out, which is was just basically a heart stent. And I've been trying to talk to SAF. I know how to modify that to make it work amazing.
Metzger isn't listening to you?
And for whatever reason, I can't break through to them. But I would say using heart stent technology, where we're using hollow tubed wire, hollow tubed wire. We're using hollow tubing, and forming it with lasers. I still see expanding and contracting files as the way to go.
Right.
And this can be done through hollow tubing. This can be, you can use ribbon instead of wire, just flat ribbon NiTi, wrapping it. And you can do this with smaller wire too. I've been experimenting with it, expanding and contracting, whether it's temperature or whether it's bioelectrical, similarly, just like heart stents. I think this is fascinating fields. I see more of a three-dimensional file, one that can expand and contract, even truly expand and contract, I think is the direction. And I think we should be looking at heart stent technology. But that's nothing new. SAF did that about 10, 15 years ago. I just think there's a better way to design it. But I'll try giving them a call, and maybe they'll listen to this. Maybe they'll call me back.
Sure. Well, that's true. That's Amita Lawn and Zvi Metzger. They actually, when they brought that out, I know there were people that kind of dismissed it, but that wasn't.
No, it's solid. It could be solid.
Yeah, they whoever was marketing for them, what was the company? Arden. Who they brought it to distribute in North America, they dropped the ball big time.
Yep.
Yeah, they I don't know that they understood it because it was such a radical difference.
Yeah.
I don't think they understood how to market it.
Nope.
Because once again, there was a lot of pushback from certain people. And yet, you're right. I mean, everything, everything old is new again, right? So Who knows? You never know. Chuck, this was like mind blowing. Thank you for letting me spend the time with you. I think that's just.
Thank you.
It was amazing. I'm going to get the recording to John Ferrone and or to Mike, just so that they have it on file. And really, this was the best part of this whole thing is you get to meet people and you get to understand their thought process. And if they're all great people, are all very humble, but it's the mechanics of their brain, the way the chemistry is floating around up there. It's really quite fascinating to hear how they brought their backgrounds into what they do, and yet it all had a nuance, right? Nobody ever it was like Malcolm Gladwell, right? Everything went to the tipping point and the outlier. And I appreciate this very much. It was great. I appreciate you spending the time.
I appreciate you, Ken.
Have a good day, my friend. Stay safe. Stay well.
Thank you, my
Take care of yourself. Be well. Thank you. Bye-bye.